6-part overview of the police in the United States. History of the carry clubs and revolvers in the mid-1800s. In contemporary American police agencies, the dispute concerning uniforms and firearms has long been resolved. However, the use of force by the police is still an issue that incites debate in police agencies today. Policing in the United States, 1800 to 1970. One way to understand the history of American policing beginning in the 19th century through the 21st century is to dissect it into a series of eras. Depending on which resource you choose, the number and names of those eras will slightly vary. However, there is a general agreement on the influential people and important events that took place over the course of the history of American policing. The article written by George Kelling and Mark Moore included at the end of this section provides 3 eras as the framework for an interesting and thorough discussion of the history and progression of policing in the United States. The remainder of this section will continue to identify important people and events that have shaped and influenced policing up through 1970. Police officers were viewed as an extension of politicians, 1916. Politics and the police in America, 1800s-1900s. A distinct characteristic of policing in the United States during the 1800s is the direct and powerful involvement of politics. During this time, policing was heavily entrenched in local politics. The relationship between the police and local politicians was reciprocal in nature. Politicians hired and retained police officers as a means to maintain their political power, and in return for employment, police officers would help politicians stay in office by encouraging citizens to vote for them. The relationship was so close between politicians and the police that it was common practice to change the entire personnel of the police department when there were changes to the local political administration. Politicians were able to maintain their control over police agencies, as they had a direct hand in choosing the police chiefs that would run the agencies. The appointment to the position of police chief came with a price. By accepting the position, police chiefs had little control over decision-making that would impact their employees and agencies. Many police chiefs did not accept the strong political presence in their agencies, and as a result, the turnover rate for chiefs of police at this time was very high. For example, Cincinnati went through 7 chiefs between 1878 and 1886. Buffalo, NY, tried 8 between 1879 and 1894. Chicago saw 9 come and go between 1879 and 1897. And Los Angeles changed heads 13 times between 1879 and 1889. Politics also heavily influenced the hiring and promotion of patrol officers. In order to secure a position as a patrol officer in New York City, the going rate was $300, while officers in San Francisco were required to pay $400. In regard to promoted positions, the going rate in New York City for a sergeant's position was $1,600, and it was $12,000 to $15,000 for a position as captain. Upon being hired, policemen were also expected to contribute a portion of their salary to support the dominant political party. 56 political bosses had control over nearly every position within police agencies during this era. Due to the extreme political influence during this time, there were virtually no standards for hiring or training police officers. Section 1. The history of the police. Native American police officers, 1883 and beyond. Section highlights. Examine the English roots of American policing. Understand evolution from watch groups to formalized police agencies. Look at the professionalization of the police through reform. It is important to examine the history of policing in the United States in order to understand how it has progressed and changed over time. Alterations to the purpose, duties, and structure of American police agencies have allowed this profession to evolve from ineffective watch groups to police agencies that incorporate advanced technology and problem-solving strategies into their daily operations. This section provides an overview of the history of American policing, beginning with a discussion of the English influence of Sir Robert Peel and the London Metropolitan Police. Next, early law enforcement efforts in colonial America are discussed using a description of social and political issues relevant to the police at that time. And finally, this section concludes with a look at early police reform efforts and the tension this created between the police and citizens in their communities. This section is organized in a chronological manner, identifying some of the most important historical events and people who contributed to the development of American policing. The beginning of American policing. The English influence. American policing has been heavily influenced by the English system throughout the course of history. In the early stages of development in both England and colonial America, citizens were responsible for law enforcement in their communities. 1. The English referred to this as kin police, in which people were responsible for watching out for their relatives or kin. 2. In colonial America, a watch system consisting of citizen volunteers, usually men, was in place until the mid-19th century. 3. Citizens that were part of watch groups provided social services, including lighting street lamps, running soup kitchens, recovering lost children, capturing runaway animals, and a variety of other services. Their involvement in crime control activities at this time was minimal at best. 4. Policing in England and colonial America was largely ineffective, as it was based on a volunteer system and their method of patrol was both disorganized and sporadic. 5. Sometime later, the responsibility of enforcing laws shifted from individual citizen volunteers to groups of men living within the community. This was referred to as the Frank Pledge system in England. 6. The Frank Pledge system was a semi-structured system in which groups of men were responsible for enforcing the law. Men living within a community would form groups of 10 called tithings, or tithings. 10 tithings were then grouped into hundreds, and then hundreds were grouped into shires, similar to counties. 7. A person called the shire reeve, sheriff, was then chosen to be in charge of each shire. 8. The individual members of tithings were responsible for capturing criminals and bringing them to court, while shire reeves were responsible for providing a number of services, including the oversight of the activities conducted by the tithings in their shire. 9. A similar system existed in America during this time in which constables, sheriffs, and citizen-based watch groups were responsible for policing in the colonies. Sheriffs were responsible for catching criminals, working with the courts, and collecting taxes. Law enforcement was not a top priority for sheriffs, as they could make more money by collecting taxes within the community. 10. Night watch groups in colonial America, as well as day watch groups that were added at a later time, were largely ineffective. Instead of controlling crime in their community, some members of the watch groups would sleep and or socialize while they were on duty. 11. These citizen-based watch groups were not equipped to deal with the increasing social unrest and rioting that were beginning to occur in both England and colonial America in the late 1700s through the early 1800s. 12. It was at this point in time that publicly funded police departments began to emerge across both England and colonial America. Sir Robert Peel and the London Metropolitan Police in 1829, Sir Robert Peel, Home Secretary of England, introduced the bill for improving the police in and near the metropolis, Metropolitan Police Act, to Parliament with the goal of creating a police force to manage the social conflict resulting from rapid urbanization and industrialization taking place in the City of London. 13. Peel's efforts resulted in the creation of the London Metropolitan Police on September 29, 1829. 14. Historians and scholars alike identify the London Metropolitan Police as the first modern police department. 15. Sir Robert Peel is often referred to as the father of modern policing, as he played an integral role in the creation of this department, as well as several basic principles that would later guide the formatine of police departments in the United States. Past and current police officers working in the London Metropolitan Police Department are often referred to as bobbies or peelers as a way to honor the efforts of Sir Robert Peel. 16. Peel believed that the function of the London Metropolitan Police should focus primarily on crime prevention, that is, preventing crime from occurring instead of detecting it after it had occurred. To do this, the police would have to work in a coordinated and centralized manner, provide coverage across large designated beat areas, and also be available to the public both night and day. 17. It was also during this time that preventive patrol first emerged as a way to potentially deter criminal activity. The idea was that citizens. Section 1. The History of the Police 34-part overview of the police in the United States. Would think twice about committing crimes if they noticed a strong police presence in their community. This approach to policing would be vastly different from the early watch groups that patrolled the streets in an unorganized and erratic manner. 18. Watch groups prior to the creation of the London Metropolitan Police were not viewed as an effective or legitimate source of protection by the public. 19. It was important to Sir Robert Peel that the newly created London Metropolitan Police Department be viewed as a legitimate organization in the eyes of the public, unlike the earlier watch groups. 20. To facilitate this legitimation, Peel identified several principles that he believed would lead to credibility with citizens, including that the police must be under government control, have a military-like organizational structure, and have a central headquarters that was located in an area that was easily accessible to the public. 21. He also thought that the quality of men that were chosen to be police officers would further contribute to the organization's legitimacy. For example, he believed that men who were even-tempered and reserved and that could employ the appropriate type of discipline to citizens would make the best police officers. 22. It was also important to Peel that his men wear appropriate uniforms, display numbers, badge numbers, so that citizens could easily identify them, not carry firearms, and receive appropriate training in order to be effective at their work. 23. Many of these ideologies were also adopted by American police agencies during this time period and remain in place in some contemporary police agencies across the United States. It is important to note that recently, there has been some debate about whether Peel really espoused the previously mentioned ideologies or principles or if they are the result of various interpretations, or misinterpretations, of the history of English policing. 24. Policing in colonial America. Similar to England, colonial America experienced an increase in population in major cities during the 1700s. 25. Some of these cities began to see an influx of immigrant groups moving in from various countries, including Germany, Ireland, Italy, and several Scandinavian countries, which directly contributed to the rapid increase in population. 26. The growth in population also created an increase in social disorder and unrest. The sources of social tension varied across different regions of colonial America. However, the introduction of new racial and ethnic groups was identified as a common source of discord. 27. Racial and ethnic conflict was a problem across colonial America, including both the northern and southern regions of the country. 28. Since the watch groups could no longer cope with this change in the social climate, more formalized means of policing began to take shape. Most of the historical literature describing the early development of policing in colonial America focuses specifically on the northern regions of the country while neglecting events that took place in the southern region, specifically, the creation of slave patrols in the South. 29. Slave patrols first emerged in South Carolina in the early 1700s, but historical documents also identify the existence of slave patrols in most other parts of the southern region. Refer to the Reichel article included at the end of this section. 30. Samuel Walker identified slave patrols as the first publicly funded police agencies in the American South. 31. Slave patrols, or paddy rollers, were created to manage the race-based conflict occurring in the southern region of colonial America. These patrols were created with the specific intent of maintaining control over slave populations. 32. Interestingly, slave patrols would later extend their responsibilities to include control over white indentured servants. 33. Sally Haddon identified three principal duties placed on slave patrols in the South during this time, including searches of slave lodges, keeping slaves off of roadways, and disassembling meetings organized by groups of slaves. 34. Slave patrols were known for their high level of brutality and ruthlessness as they maintained control over the slave population. The members of slave patrols were usually white males, occasionally a few women, from every echelon in the social strata, ranging from very poor individuals to plantation owners that wanted to ensure control over their slaves. 35. Slave patrols remained in place during the Civil War and were not completely disbanded after slavery ended. 36. During early Reconstruction, several groups merged with what was formerly known as slave patrols to maintain control over African American citizens. Groups such as the federal military, the state militia, and the Ku Klux Klan took over the responsibilities of earlier slave patrols and were known to be even more violent than their predecessors. 37. Over time, these groups began to resemble and operate similar to some of the newly established police departments in the United States. In fact, David Barlow and Melissa Barlow noted that by 1837, the Charleston Police Department had 100 officers and the primary function of this organization was slave patrol. These officers regulated the movements of slaves and free blacks, checking documents, enforcing slave codes, guarding against slave revolts, and catching runaway slaves. 38. Scholars and historians assert that the transition from slave patrols to publicly funded police agencies was seamless in the southern region of the United States. 39. While some regard slave patrol as the first formal attempt at policing in America, others identify the unification of police departments in several major cities in the early to mid-1800s as the beginning point in the development of modern policing in the United States. 40. For example, the New York City Police Department was unified in 1845, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department in 1846, the Chicago Police Department in 1854, and the Los Angeles Police Department in 1869, to name a few. These newly created police agencies adopted three distinct characteristics from their English counterparts. 1. Limited police authority. The powers of the police are defined by law. 2. Local control. Local governments bear the responsibility for providing police service. And 3. Fragmented law enforcement authority. Several agencies within a defined area share the responsibility for providing police services, which ultimately leads to problems with communication, cooperation, and control among these agencies. 41. It is important to point out that these characteristics are still present in modern American police agencies. Other issues that caused debate within the newly created American police departments at this time included whether police officers should be armed and wear uniforms and to what extent physical force should be used during interactions with citizens. 42. Sir Robert Peel's position on these matters was clear when he formed the London Metropolitan Police Department. He wanted his officers to wear distinguishable uniforms so that citizens could easily identify them. He did not want his officers armed, and he hired and trained his officers in a way that would allow them to use the appropriate type of response and force when interacting with citizens. 43. American police officers felt that the uniforms would make them the target of mockery, resulting in less legitimacy with citizens, and that the level of violence occurring in the United States at that time warranted them carrying firearms and using force whenever necessary. 44. Despite their objections, police officers in cities were required to wear uniforms, and shortly after that, they were allowed to urban police officers, in 1890 until today. Essentially, politicians within each ward would hire men that would agree to help them stay in office and not consider whether they were the most qualified people for the job. August Vollmer bluntly described the lack of standards during this era. Under the old system, police officials were appointed through political affiliations, and because of this they were frequently unintelligent and untrained. They were distributed through the area to be policed according to a hit-or-miss system and without adequate means of communication. They had little or no record-keeping system. Their investigation methods were obsolete, and they had no conception of the preventive possibilities of the service. Mark Holler described the lack of training another way. New policemen heard a brief speech from a high-ranking officer, received a hickory club, a whistle, and a key to the call box, and were sent out on the street to work with an experienced officer. Not only were the policemen untrained in law, but they operated within a criminal justice system that generally placed little emphasis upon legal procedure. Police services provided to citizens included a variety of tasks related to health, social welfare, and law enforcement. Robert Fogelson described police duties during this time as officers cleaning streets, inspecting boilers, distributed supplies to the poor, accommodated the homeless, investigated vegetable markets, operated emergency vehicles, and attempted to curb crime. All of these activities were conducted under the guise that it would keep the citizens, or voters, happy, which in turn would help keep the political ward boss in office. This was a way to ensure job security for police officers, as they would likely lose their jobs if their ward boss was voted out of office. In other cities across the United States, police officers provided limited services to citizens. Police officers spent time in local saloons, bowling alleys, restaurants, barbershops, and other business establishments during their shifts. They would spend most of their time eating, drinking, and socializing with business owners when they were supposed to be patrolling the streets. There was also limited supervision over patrol officers during this time. Accountability existed only to the political leaders that had helped the officers acquire their jobs. In an essay, August Vollmer described the limited supervision over patrol officers during earlier times. A patrol sergeant escorted him to his post, and at hourly intervals contacted him by means of voice, baton, or whistle. The sergeant tapped his baton on the sidewalk, or blew a signal with his whistle, and the patrolman was obliged to respond, thus indicating his position on the post. Sometime in the mid to late 1800s, call boxes containing telephone lines linked directly to police headquarters were implemented to help facilitate better communication between patrol officers, police. Section 1. The History of the Police. 7 of 8 Part I. Overview of the police in the United States. Call boxes were the most common form of communication used by police officers during the political era. Supervisors, and central headquarters. The lack of police supervised science coupled with political control of patrol officers opened the door for police misconduct and corruption. Incidents of police corruption and misconduct were common during this era of policing. Corrupt activities were often related to politics, including the rigging of elections and persuading people to vote a certain way, as well as misconduct stemming from abuse of authority and misuse of force by officers. Police officers would use violence as an accepted practice when they believed that citizens were acting in an unlawful manner. Policemen would physically discipline juveniles, as they believed that it provided more of a deterrent effect than arrest or incarceration. Violence would also be applied to alleged perpetrators in order to extract information from them or coerce confessions out of them. This was referred to as the third degree. Violence was also believed to be justified in instances in which officers felt that they were being disrespected by citizens. It was acceptable to dole out street justice if citizens were non-compliant to officers' demands or requests. If citizens had a complaint regarding the actions of police officers, they had very little recourse, as police supervisors and local courts would usually side with police officers. One of the first groups appointed to examine complaints of police corruption was the Lexow Commission. After issuing 3,000 subpoenas and hearing testimony from 700 witnesses, which produced more than 10,000 pages of testimony, the report from the Lexow investigation revealed 4 main conclusions. First, the police did not act as guardians of the public peace at the election polls. Instead, they acted as agents of Tammany Hall. Second, instead of suppressing vice activities such as gambling and prostitution, officers allowed these activities to occur with the condition that they receive a cut of the profits. Third, detectives only looked for stolen property if they would be given a reward for doing so. And finally, there was evidence that the police often harassed law-abiding citizens and individuals with less power in the community instead of providing police services to them. After the Lexow investigation ended, several officers were fired and, in some cases, convicted of criminal offenses. Sometime later, the courts reversed these decisions, allowing the officers to be rehired. These actions by the courts demonstrate the strength of political influence in American policing during this time period. Policing reform in the United States, 1900s-1970s. Political involvement in American policing was viewed as a problem by both the public and police reformers in the mid to late 19th century. Early attempts, in the 19th century, at police reform in the United States were unsuccessful, as citizens tried to pressure police agencies to make changes. Later on in the early 20th century, with help from the progressives, reform efforts began to take hold and made significant changes to policing in the United States. A goal of police reform included the removal of politics from American policing. This effort included the creation of standards for recruiting and hiring police officers and administrators instead of allowing politicians to appoint these individuals to help them carry out their political agendas. Another goal of police reform during the early 1900s was to professionalize the police. This could be achieved by setting standards for the quality of police officers hired, implementing better police training, and adopting various types of technology to aid police officers in their daily operations, including motorized patrol and the use of two-way radios. The professionalization movement of the police in America resulted in police agencies becoming centralized bureaucracies focused primarily on crime control. The importance of the role of crime fighter was highlighted in the Wickersham Commission Report, 1931, which examined rising crime rates in the United States and the inability of the police to manage this problem. It was proposed in this report that police officers could more effectively deal with rising crime by focusing their police duties primarily on crime control instead of the social services that they had once provided in the political era. In an article published in 1933, August Vollmer outlined some of the significant changes that he believed had taken place in American policing from 1900 to 1930. The use of the civil service system in the hiring and promotion of police officers was one way to help remove politics from policing and to set standards for police recruits. The implementation of effective police training programs was also an important change during this time. The ability of police administrators to strategically distribute police force according to the needs of each area or neighborhood was another change made to move toward a professional model of policing. There was also an improved means of communication at this time, which included the adoption of two-way radio systems. Many agencies also began to adopt more reliable record-keeping systems, improved methods for identifying criminals, including the use of fingerprinting systems, and more advanced technologies used in criminal investigations, such as lie detectors and science-based crime labs. Despite the heavy emphasis on crime control that began to emerge in the mid-1930s, some agencies began to use crime prevention techniques. And finally, this era saw the emergence of state highway police to aid in the control of traffic, which had increased after the automobile was introduced in the United States. Vollmer stated that all of these changes contributed to the professionalization of the police in America. O.W. Wilson was the protege of August Vollmer. His work essentially picked up where Vollmer's left off in the late 1930s. He started out as police chief in Wichita, Kansas, and then moved on to establish the School of Criminology at the University of California. Wilson's greatest contribution to American policing lies within police administration. Specifically, his vision involved the centralization of police agencies. This includes both organizational structure and management of personnel. Wilson is also credited with creating a strategy for distributing patrol officers within a community based on reported crimes and calls for service. His book, Police Administration, published in 1950, became the Bible of police management and ultimately defined how professional police agencies would be managed for many decades that followed. It is clear that the work of Vollmer and Wilson helped American policing advance beyond that of the radar speed reader and patrol car, 1954. 10-part overview of the police in the United States. Police officers focused on order maintenance during war protests, 1969. Political era. However, Harlan Howne and Judson Jeffries argue that police reforms of the 1950s and 1960s neglected the relationship between the police and the public. The relationship deteriorated between the two groups because the city's ends called for police services that were mostly non-criminal in nature, and the police responded with a heavy emphasis on crime control. The distance between these two groups would become even greater as the social climate began to change in the United States. The 1950s marked the beginning of a social movement that would bring race relations to the attention of all Americans. Several events involving African American citizens ignited a series of civil rights marches and demonstrations across the country in the mid-1950s. For example, in December 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested after she violated a segregation ordinance by refusing to move to the back of the bus. Her arrest triggered what is now referred to as the Montgomery bus boycott. African American citizens carpooled instead of using the city bus system to protest segregation ordinances. Local police began to ticket black motorists at an increasing pace to retaliate against the boycott. In one instance, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested for driving 5 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Arrests were made at any type of sit-in or protest, whether they were peaceful or not. Research focused on the precipitants and underlying conditions that contributed to race riots during this time period identified police preempts and police actions as the major conditions. Police reform resulted in police officers shifting their focus to crime control, 1960. That were present prior to most of the race riots in the 1950s and 1960s. In addition, the President's Commission on Civil Disorder, also known as the Kerner Commission, reported that almost invariably the incident that ignites disorder arises from police action. Social disorder resulting from protests, marches, and rioting in the 1960s resulted in frequent physical clashes between the police and the public. It was during this time that people across the United States began to see photographs in newspapers and news reports on television that featured incidents of violence between these two groups. The level of violence and force being used by police officers was shocking to some citizens, as they had not been exposed to it through visual news media in the past. One of the most recognized examples of this type of violence was the clash between police and protesters at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in August of 1968.85. Graphic photos of the police hitting, pushing, and arresting protesters were featured on the national news and in many national printed publications. These types of incidents contributed to the public relations problem experienced by American police during the 1960s. Any police reform efforts taking place in the 1960s were based heavily on a traditional model of policing. Traditional policing focuses on responding to calls for service and managing crimes in a reactive manner. This approach to policing focuses on serious crime as opposed to issues related to social disorder and citizens' quality of life. The traditional policing model places great importance on the number of arrests police officers make or how fast officers can respond to citizens' calls for service. In addition, this policing strategy does not involve a cooperative effort between the police and citizens. Richard Adams and his colleagues described it best when they stated that traditional policing tends to stress the role of police officers in controlling crime and views citizens' role in the apprehension of criminals as minor players at best and as part of the problem at worst. The use of traditional policing practices coupled with the social unrest that was taking place during the 1960s contributed to the gulf that was widening between the police and citizens. Summary: American policing was influenced by Sir Robert Peel and the London Metropolitan Police. Policing in colonial America consisted of voluntary watch groups formed by citizens. These groups were unorganized and considered ineffective. Slaves patrols in the southern region of the United States were used to control slave populations and have been identified by some scholars and historians as the first formal police agencies in this country. Politics played a major role in American policing in the 1800s. Political involvement was believed to be at the Section 1 The History of the Police 11 core of police corruption timeline, present in the agencies at that time and until now. Police reform was geared toward making the police more professional. Call box Frank Pledge System London Metropolitan Police. Key terms: Political era, Reform era, Sir Robert Peel Slave Patrols, third-degree tithing. Discussion questions. 1. Why is Sir Robert Peel important to the development of policing in the United States? 2. Describe some off-the-duty-s associated with the early watch groups in the United States in the mid-19th century. 12-part overview of the police in the United States. 3. Identify several principles espoused by Sir Robert Peel as he began to assemble the London Metropolitan Police Department. 4. What was O.W. Wilson's main contribution to American policing? 5. Explain how the traditional model of policing contributed to the deterioration of the relationship between police and citizens in the United States during the 1960s. Related web resources. To learn more about Sir Robert Peel, go to http://www.bbc.co.uk/history/historic_figure/Peel_Sir_Robert. SHTML. To learn about some important dates in the history of American law enforcement, go to http://www.liamf.org/fact/enforcement/updates.html. To learn more about the history of police technology, go to http://www.policetechnology.net/at59.html.
Open the door. Get him in.
Arrest for a private gathering? That's police overreach.
You got no liquor license on this place. Get the fuck out of my face. You.
Hey, let's just keep it calm. Are you fucking kidding me? Come on, get in the damn van. Step in there. Let's get them moving, gentlemen. Let's go. Get them in the wagon.
Hey, Dave! Tell you get busted, you alcoholic!
Oh, the night's not over. Go home. Get him in. Last one. Get him in.
Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
Let's go. In. Get in. Let's go. Get in the car. Let's go.